Welcome to this episode of Rainer on Leadership. Glad to have all of you with us. Dad, glad you're still here with us too.
Is that a kind of an eschatological statement of my elderly state in impending demise?
I'm just glad you're here. That's really all I mean by that. You can read into it whatever you like.
The will is done. It's equally divided. It's not going to affect anything.
Yes. We don't need to talk about that on the radio. So we're going to be talking about hiring today. And I think we can all say hiring is quite difficult, not only in the church, but everywhere. And specifically, how involved should the lead pastor be when hiring church staff? But
that's a great question, Sam. I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah, it's the title of the episode, so it's kind of easy.
I got it.
But I did write it. So let's talk about the Life Application Study Bible, though. Tyndale has an incredible resource. In fact, it's the #1 selling study Bible. If you're a pastor, if you're a church leader, you should own the #1 selling study Bible. It helps enable a reader to better understand the text, spiritual truths, and how they apply to everyday experiences. What makes this Bible such a complete and life-changing resource? It begins with the unique character of its study notes, which includes really 3 important things. 1, the information necessary to help you understand the passage and the truth that is being taught. 2, an explanation of how the truth is relevant for today. And 3, the application to your personal situation. With the study Bible and application, and with the Bible study and application in one place, it provides you what you need to apply Bible teaching to everyday life. Go get you one. The Life Application Study Bible by Tyndale. And obviously, New Living Translation, which is our favorite.
Always and forever. Love the NLT. So, Sam, how involved should the lead pastor be when hiring church staff? New church staff.
It depends.
That is a great answer. Shall we wrap this up now?
It depends. Yes. We got our sponsor done. Let's go.
Yes.
No. I would say in the vast majority of cases, the lead pastor should be involved. And it's hard for me to think of a situation where the lead pastor would not be involved.
Especially since you're describing it as lead pastor, which presumes the person who is providing human leadership in the church under God's authority. I guess there's some rare situations where there's a pastor who is nothing but a teaching pastor, but that person may be the senior level, and then there are other people who carry out other things like staff, but it is rare and rare indeed.
Yeah, and those would certainly be the exception, not the norm. And I think for most of our listeners, they're either sole pastors or they're part of churches that, are mid-sized churches, maybe a little larger, 3, 4, 5 staff. That's pretty typical for a church. And, when you're talking about a main teaching pastor who doesn't have any sort of decision-making authority, that's a very unique circumstance. It exists, but it's very unique. So we can put those off to the sidelines and say that's more of an anomaly. Let's tackle the vast majority of situations. Certainly want to thank Deek. That's Deek. You know who Deek is?
Is Deek your Gen Z dude?
No, not at all.
No,
that's Wes.
Oh.
No, Deek's part of the Church Answer Central community, and he's the one who came up with this question.
Oh, that Deek. I do remember the Deek. Yeah. I hadn't seen Deek post that much in Church Answer Central, but I do remember that one.
Yeah. So that's where the idea of this came from. Hey, and if you're wondering like where we do our research, where we find out stuff, where you can be in the know for church stuff, Church Answer Central. It's part of our silver membership. You also get it at the gold and platinum level. So go sign up for churchanswers.com/free. Just go there and sign up.
Since we went on a side path before we even got back to our topic, can I just say one thing and related to that? I got a contact today from someone who is regularly watching Church Answer Central. They're not a contributor in the sense that they don't ask questions or give answers, But like many of our members, they want to keep up with what's going on. So they're reading the comments continuously. He asked me the question, where can I find a good stewardship organization? And so, that's just one example. Of course, I referred them to Church Growth Services, Mike Stottlemyre. But my point is, I'm building upon your point. This was a very specific need. Someone wanted to find out about stewardship services, so we pointed them to Mike Stottlemyre and Church Growth Services. I know that you took a segue, then I took a segue off the segue, so we're going to get back on the minor path and then get to the major path. All yours, Sam.
All right. So there are numerous kinds of church polity, but I do believe that certain principles apply to most governance structures. So as we're talking about this, we're talking more principles than we are specifics of Methodism versus Baptistic, versus Nazarene.
Congregational versus appointment. Boy, there are all kind of possibilities there.
There are. And so, and we've got listeners from across the spectrum, and, you and I come from more of a congregational background. So, I think most people have figured that out. But we do want to recognize that there are different kinds of governance structures. But these principles, I believe, are good principles for just about any governance structure. Let's start here. If the lead pastor has no say in the selection process, then the church will likely experience staff conflict.
I had that happen to me, Sam.
Yeah.
When I was a pastor and you were a kid, I had someone given to me without my input into the process. A person whose name I've mentioned to you in the past decided to railroad this particular favorite person of his to come on staff. I was the lead pastor in those days, got senior pastor. And it didn't work from day one because he essentially worked for that person in the church and was not under my accountability. I mean, if anything went wrong, he went to that person in the church. It just did not work because I had zero say in the process.
Yeah, I had a situation where we were hiring a worship pastor, not at my current church, previous church, and I was told by a certain group that they didn't want me to go pick my person. So I said, "Oh, okay, sure, you guys pick." So I made a couple of recommendations. They told me in no uncertain terms that they were bad recommendations. Then they fired me, and then they went and hired my number one choice. The worship pastor.
Things that make you.
And for those of you who are trying to figure that one out, I have no idea. He's still there. It looks like he's doing great. I'm really happy for him. He and I really didn't know each other, so it came via recommendation. And I thought, man, this guy's really good. He'd be great for our church. And they're like, this group told me no way, and then they fire me and go get him. So it's like, okay.
Wow. Hey, but we do have to acknowledge that there's another extreme. There's the one extreme where the pastor has no input. There's the other extreme where the pastor has unilateral authority. And in those cases, that pastor should seek accountability, should seek input, even if the pastor can make the ultimate decision. If he doesn't ask anybody, there's going to be problems as well.
Yes. And, I've had peers that have gone to a church and the particular polity there is that the lead pastor can hire and fire pretty much at will. And I know that many appreciate that and even will seek out positions where that's the case. I would offer caution, just like what you said. If you have unilateral authority to hire whomever you want and fire whomever you want, it's a good idea to at least get some group around you, even if it's not formal, to help you make those decisions. Typically in a church, you're going to have some sort of personnel committee or elder board that is involved as well. I think there is a lot of wisdom in having a group of 3, 4, 5 people, whatever the polity is, to kind of vet, your decisions. I know at West Bradenton, I will bring recommendations to our personnel committee, and they will vet whatever candidate that may be, pray over it, think about it, ask questions. A lot of times they're looking for ways for me to hire the people I want to hire. but they're still asking questions that I may not have thought about. They're bringing a perspective from the church that I won't have. I'm the pastor. I'm not a church member. Well, I am a church member, but I don't have that perspective. So I think it's a good thing that you would, if you don't have a formal structure, that you at least seek that out and have some level of accountability. You make a couple, 3 bad hires and you just make poor decisions, which anybody can do. I mean, that can, you can have a couple of bad hires in a row. People really start questioning your leadership. But if you have the backing of another group, again, whether that's an elder board or personnel committee, you are shielded from a lot of the criticism that may come your way because you made a unilateral decision.
This reminds me very much of what you and I are experiencing currently. We have an opening at Church Answers at the time we're doing this podcast. You and I have philosophical differences is too big of a word, but you look at maybe on a scale that we're not perfectly aligned on everything, but you and I have given each other a lot of give and take, push back, pull back, all of those types of interactions. And I think the end result is that we will end up coming up with the type of person that'll be best for the organization, because I could hire unilaterally. I could ask you to hire unilaterally, and we wouldn't have had the same dynamics that we have right now. So this is a case of just bringing in one extra person. Of course, we're bringing the team to at least give us some type of input. But the bottom line is, I don't want to think about hiring someone unless I've had some input.
Yeah, and just to add to the wisdom of having some other people involved in the process, hiring is hard right now. We're having a tough time at Church Answers finding the skill set we need at a price point that makes sense. I mean, if we had infinite amount of dollars, we could go hire who we want, but that doesn't exist. Doesn't exist in the church. So if you bring in a group of people, a lot of times they will have a network around them and they will have some way of at least reaching out to other places. And oh, by the way, if you do find yourself in a bind, at least you've got 3 or 4 other people that can make phone calls on your behalf to other churches and other places. And you can take what would, might take you 2 weeks to do, and you can get it down to a day or 2. So even just the practical side of looking for someone it's a helpful thing to have other people involved.
I would also say that congregational votes for church staff members outside of the lead pastor can be problematic. Now, that's can be, they're not always, but you can have people within the congregation that says, I've got this person that I think would be a great student pastor, and you don't present him or her, and all of a sudden they don't like the person that is being presented. The reality of it is, I like, Sam, I like what you do. You go through a personnel committee that vets. I like what Jess does at, I'm thinking about my 2 churches, West B and the church at Spring Hill. There are only 3 congregational votes at his church, if I recall, at our church. If I recall, it is for a certain level of capital expenditure. It's for the hiring of a pastor, and it's a 4 thing: annual budget and then bylaws. Those are the 4 things. So he presents candidates to the church, but it's not a congregational vote. It is, let me present this candidate and why it is. What say you, Sam, on this issue? Are congregational votes problematic for church staff on those types of organizations that have congregational government?
Yeah, and so we are speaking from a congregational perspective here. If you're talking about voting on a technology director, let's just throw that one out there. That would be a pretty unique position. Listen, it's not going to be good. It may be neutral, or it could be bad. Very rarely is this. I can't imagine a case where you're in the mid-level portions of your staff and the church is voting on it. How is that a good thing? It's not. So I would say, yeah, lead pastor, maybe a couple other positions that are prominent positions that the church needs to show some form of affirmation to say, yes, we're bought into this. Yes, we understand this is a pastor. But, if you're talking, we have we have pastors and ministers, we have directors, and then we have leaders and interns, and that's kind of our structure. And you could put a lot of different labels on those. But if we're voting on interns, like, how is that ever good? It's not. It's actually a negative thing. It shows a lack of trust. It's people who are having input that should have no input whatsoever. They don't run the church, and I just think it's ill-advised. It's maybe neutral, and maybe everyone just votes and it's okay, and you move on. I can't see it being good, and it's a lot of times bad because somebody's got a little problem that person got hired instead of their buddy over there or their son or their daughter or whatever it is. So I highly recommend churches move away from voting for every staff position, and really limit that to lead pastor, maybe worship pastor, some of an executive pastor. Those are pretty high level positions. Outside of that, and I say this as somebody who firmly believes in congregational government. What on earth? Why are you voting on the part-time sound guy like that? That's just silly. You don't need to do that.
All right, let's look at another angle. Personnel committee. This is what you do at Westby. You use a personnel committee to work with you to find a staff person instead of forming a separate search team like some churches do for every single ministry staff person. I like that process.
Yeah. Now, I could also make a philosophical argument that the church does vote on every position because you voted on the personnel committee and you delegated authority to them to make these decisions. And that's a far better way to work. Now, we have a rotating personnel committee every 3 years. We try very hard to get people on that committee that have human resource experience. Sometimes people roll off and come back on, but it works really well for us. I realize that it may not work for every church. Not every governance structure is for every church, of course. But I would just say the church does vote on every position at West Bradenton because they voted on the personnel committee and they delegated that authority to them to work with me on these hires. That being said, I don't think that you need to form a separate search team for these positions. I think that's a bit silly, and I may get some pushback on that, and that's fine. But so you have a personnel committee that handles personnel decisions. They know all the human resource stuff. They're determining salaries. They're working through employee handbooks. They know the staff. They're doing staff reviews, or at least reviewing the staff reviews that the lead pastor does. And you're going to form a separate search committee
every single time.
And who knows who's going to be on that search committee. And you may say, well, we have a representative from the personnel committee. I would say, well, just let the personnel committee do it. Yeah. That's who should be running this search, is the personnel committee. Why would you form a separate? It just doesn't make sense. I know that at least in our tribe, that's a tradition that is kind of it goes way back.
It's search committee by representation. We need an old person. We need a young person. We need a contrarian. We need someone who'll just keep their mouth shut. We'll need someone from student ministry. We'll need someone from children's ministry. And we need a new member. We need a longer term member. It's like we've got to have every group represented as if those groups are out there saying, where's my rep? Where's my rep? They're not, but we think we're doing something for them.
Which is a terrible way to hire. No other organization on the planet does that. What is it? What's the saying? A camel is a horse picked by committee or something, or I call it the consensus camel.
I don't know.
I got that metaphor wrong.
I do not know. I thought camels were something people used to smoke back in the old days. I don't know.
Yeah, it's this. If you get a committee get together and tell them that we need a horse, they're going to end up bringing you a camel. I think that's the principle there, and I've totally butchered the saying, and I'm sure people are laughing at me instead of with me right now. That being said, you don't need a separate search committee. And understand if you're saying, well, our bylaws require that. Okay, I get it. And if you're new in a church, that may not be something you want to push. And I totally understand. But if you've got some tenure and some chips, on your side, and you can make some changes, this is definitely one of the changes I would make, because rarely is a good hire made by just you're going to randomly sample the congregation or have some sort of representative group. I mean, that's not how hiring works. That's not how you're going to find the best person. That's just a good way to have a bunch of arguments. And
All
that's
right.
not helpful.
In the minute or two we got left, let's talk about this must. You must follow your bylaws in the process. You can get in big trouble if you don't follow your bylaws. If you think there's something bad in the bylaws, bring it before the church to change them. Don't try to work through around them in a way that violates them, right?
I had a meeting last night with my deacons, and they are incredible.
Is Deek a deacon?
Deek is not a member of my. Deek would make a great Deek the deacon. Yeah, it sounds like a comic strip. We do want to thank Deek for this question, but no, he's not a deacon at my church. But it would be if you have a Deek at your church, you really should put him in the deacon process, because every church should have a Deek the deacon. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and Elrod the elder. Now go on.
Yes. I had a church member named Elwood, but not Elrod.
There's a horse over here that's been beaten to death, so we'll just move on.
All right. I had a meeting with my deacons last night. Great group of guys. Love them to death. They're very helpful. And we've got something big on the horizon at West Bradenton, and it requires us to vote. And they started just, hey, bylaws. So if we call a special call business meeting, we got to have 2 weeks, right? They're just asking the question. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. And so last night, we've got this meeting this coming Sunday. So today, this time of this recording, it's Thursday. This was last night on a Tuesday night. So 2 nights ago. It's a Wednesday night now. It was Tuesday before. It's coming Sunday is our vote. That's what I'm trying to say. And they were cautioning me to follow the bylaws. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I was not intentionally trying to break them, but they brought up these points. And I thought, yes, we need to make sure we follow our bylaws. Do not knowingly break your bylaws to get your way. That's just a good way to cause yourself a lot of heartache, a whole lot of heartache. Don't do that.
I totally agree. Well, Sam, you started off by thanking our sponsor, Tyndale. We've got a special sponsor that we want to share with you at the conclusion of this podcast. So just stay tuned for that. For those of you who have looking for staff in churches, go back and not only listen to this podcast or watch it on YouTube. And by the way, subscribe, like, review, all the things for podcasts, apps, and for YouTube so that we can keep on getting the word out. But stand by for this sponsor, because it is going to be in some exciting stuff with this new sponsor. Thank you, as always, for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. And before we go, Sam, I've got to share one thing with you in conclusion. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
Okay. So I got an email from the Nashville paper called the Tennessean. And let me see can you see the subject line?
You got questions? We got answers.
We got answers. Yes. I don't have any idea where the Tennessean got that. This has been Church Answers with Thom Rainer and Sam Rainer on Rainer on Leadership. You got questions? We got church
answers.
We'll see you in the next episode. An incredible thing happened when Church Answers University offered some scholarships through this podcast. We got a lot of requests for the scholarships. And so what happened is the first several of them were grabbed up quickly. We went back to the donor, and the donor said, I'll do at least one more. So we did one more, and one more person got the scholarship. Well, why am I saying that? The donors come back, and the donor, she is offering us 5 more scholarships. Now, what does that mean? Church Answers University is your alternative for ministry training, for theological training, for those who could not go to a seminary or maybe to a Bible college. And it's being used by lay persons who are coming on staff with churches. It's being used by bivocational pastors. It's even being used by 50 students in Uganda who do not have training otherwise. It is an incredibly fast growing, but even more than the growth is the ministry impact that it's having. So we're delighted that Church Answers University is our sponsor and that they are offering 5 more scholarships, 50% each. Now, what that means is full tuition is $1,497 to be exact. And what that means is you're getting it for under $750, all 10 courses, all the books complete because of the generosity of a donor. We're delighted that Church Answers University is the sponsor of Reigning on Leadership, and we're delighted to offer these on a first-come, first-served basis. What do? You write Matt, M-A-T-T, at churchanswers.com. Matt, M-A-T-T, at churchanswers.com. If you want to find out about Church Answers University, you can go to churchanswers.university. But if you're interested in a scholarship, write Matt at churchanswers.com. First come, first serve. We're delighted to have this ministry, and I know it can make a difference in your life, your ministry, and your church. Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just 2 or 3 things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. Well? Maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves?
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.